In our last segment, we were talking about persecution coming to the West, and I'd like to start off with that. Coming persecution of Christians to the West has started. Let's look at the example. A slew of Catholic churches from Florida to California were burnt and vandalized over the weekend as police continue to investigate whether or not they are connected to protest targeting symbols and statues. Earlier, we talked about censor what really is happening. The question is, who really wants to remove the statues in America? Is this a movement that is political or is it religious? Following George Floyd's police-related death in May, Black Lives Matter leaders and protesters called for the toppling of statues from the Confederate symbols to former U.S. presidents and abolitionists. As a matter of fact, Abraham Lincoln, they want to get rid of his, and that's the one that stopped it. Now, I want you to do a little homework here. I want you to go and look up slavery in countries where Muslims are in charge, because they're over here protesting slavery that happened hundreds of years ago, and is still happening in their culture because it's all right to do that according to the Quran. So why are they doing it? Because they want to divide and conquer. Activist Shaun King called for all images depicting Jesus as a white European and his mother to be torn down because they're forms of white supremacy and racist propaganda. Now, first of all, the Bible talks about not making any images of anything and worshiping them, and believe it or not, there are some people who worship a picture of Jesus Christ and we don't even know what he looks like. And that's not the issue. The issue is this gives them a reason to destroy things in the church. Anti-Christian hysteria has grown into church burning terror, and people might be next, according to the Federalist, July 13, 2021. Government, they are the ones advocating or imposing a secular agenda on religious institutions. We see this. Secularism as a culture is increasingly becoming hostile to Christianity in the West. The 2021 report on religious freedoms in the world, released by Aid to the Church in Need, ACN, reveals that there has been a rise in political persecution in the West. This new category of persecution comes in the form of restrictive measure encoded in public policy and law. Public policy. That reminds me of a scripture we just read. And through his policy, Daniel chapter 8, verse 25, the Antichrist will use political policies to target Christians. Now, can we give any kind of example of that happening in America today? Surely that's way off. It's not today. Well, let me just say this. During COVID, really, as we start looking at COVID was a dry run for the Antichrist and the New World Order. Basically, churches were non-essential and liquor stores were essential. So they were able to close churches, make policy that could close churches, and nobody said anything about it. Baylor's professor calls for prosecution of criticism of Fauci and other scientists as hate crimes. So in essence, you can go to a store and you can steal up to $900 and it's all right. But if you say anything about the government and what they say is right and you think is wrong, you should be put in prison. And by the way, Baylor was a Southern Baptist school. I think they disassociated as of now. Don't you think it's interesting that throughout history, during a national crisis, people flocked to churches to pray? During COVID, the churches were closed and no one questioned the decision. Let me give you an example how this whole thing about COVID was not about safety of a person. It wasn't about health. Even though they used health and that people did die, I'm not saying that. But how they used this crisis in order to form an opinion that they wanted to. Let's look at this. Church members fined $500 for attending drive-in church. Fight back with lawsuit, April 14, 2020, The Daily Wire. Last Wednesday, churchgoers in Greenville, Mississippi attended a drive-in church service in the parking lot of the Temple Baptist Church, where they all remained in their cars with no chance of breaking the 6-foot policy or limit on a group gathering. Despite the effort to faithfully adhere to the governor's order, social distancing measures, the church service was busted up by 8 police officers and the churchgoers slapped with $500 fines. Now, you're in your car, right? And they start busting this thing. It had nothing to do with health. It's the government being able to control the church and basically persecute them. They call it polite persecution. That's what it is. Secularism says to conservatives, Christianity must either compromise or be crushed. How will persecution be accepted in America? You have to do this. Fundamental Christianity must be deemed enemies of the state. How's that happen? 1, the conservative church will become the enemy of the state for our stand against LGBTQ. This is an article that was written by a lesbian. She says this: the faster conservative religion is overwhelmingly seen as mean, crazy, violent, hateful, misogynistic, and anti-science, the faster we as a society can move on. See that? What she says is, the first thing we got to do is we got to make these people look crazy. We got to make them look violent. We've got to make them look like they don't accept anything, and they're anti-science. You want to talk about anti-science? They're running around talking about transgenderism. They're trying to teach our children in elementary school that a boy can be a girl and a girl can be a boy, and our government is actually paying for people to be transformed. Yet, if you follow the science, as they always say to do, all you've got to do is go to DNA. It will tell you if you are a boy or a girl. The next thing they'll use is the conservative church will become the enemy of the state for our stand against human trafficking and drug trafficking they call immigration. It is no secret that fentanyl is flowing over our western border. It is no secret that China is sending fentanyl, and young people are dying in masses in America. Men who could be in the Army and in the Navy and in the military to fight China, they don't have to shoot them out there. They just send the drug over and kill them right here. Not only that, but human trafficking. Oh, I know you saw those stories, those sad stories of children in cages and separated from their parents. Did they tell you that most of the children had nothing to do with the people that they were with? They were not related at all. They were sex traffickers. Now, don't tell me that you're concerned about slavery 100 years ago when you ignore human trafficking, which is a modern day form of slavery, and you just turn a deaf ear to it. Also, the conservative church will become an enemy of the state with the right to bear arms. Former President Obama said, clinging to their religion and their guns. According to John 8:44, it says, "Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning." Let me tell you, all this stuff, as we see the Antichrist coming on the stage, once we see all the violence, and as a matter of fact, God destroyed the earth the first time because violence. You're starting to see violence all over our world. I mean, I was watching something the other day about how many people are killed in road rage. People just start shooting people. Folks, you cannot legislate morality. You cannot tell people you're going to love that person no matter what color they are, and they're going to do it because it's policy. The heart is wickedly, desperately wicked, the Bible says. And let me tell you something, folks. This whole thing about getting rid of our guns, if you look at any country that has been disarmed, the first thing they do is disarm you right before they take over. Our founding fathers knew that that was important. The conservative church will become the enemy of the state for our stand against abortion. You see, abortion is not about women's bodies. It's about human sacrifice. I'd like to read a part of a newsletter by a man from Liberty Counsel, Matt Staver. And this is what it says. Surrounded by witches and warlocks openly performing their dark art and craft, our team has been on Capitol Hill praying over the high courts and the justices. Despite decades of pro-life work around the country and at the U.S. Supreme Court, we've never witnessed such hostile and demonically inspired evil directed at the justices and those of us who respect human life. He goes on to say this: a small podium and 2 loudspeakers were set up to allow the prayer vigil attendees to speak and play worship songs. But as prayer began, our staff and the intercessors were surrounded by darkness. Black-robed witches and warlocks began arriving on the scene, screaming obscenities over the prayers. They were screaming things like, "F your God," and "Your religion begins," to fill the air. Satan worshipers have covered sidewalks with black magic ritual circles and candles, performing their dark incantations near midnight most evenings. Half-burned candles and other garbage from witchcraft rituals lay scattered on public spaces around the court and our ministry center. Meanwhile, one man who had the attire and appearance of a horror movie warlock targeted senior ladies quietly praying for the lives of the unborn. The warlock would crowd one woman at a time, making the sign of Satan over each woman's head. Now, you know what I got to ask? I got to ask the question, where's the FBI? These people were threatened. Where's the FBI on this stuff? Again, I'm just telling you, it is not about a woman's body. It's about human sacrifice. You see, in pagan cultures, it was always totally legal to allow people to kill their babies. They would appease the nature gods. See, to witches and Satanists, it's not about a woman's body, but legalized sacrifice. If the left resists, they're courageous. If the conservative Christians resist, we're anti-American.
And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world.
How prevalent will devil worship be during this time? There will be no compromise at this time. Either you will worship Satan or you will worship God.
If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with a sword must be killed with a sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
So in essence, just like Peter was trying to defend Jesus and cut the ear off the guard, Jesus says, don't retaliate. And that's what we're seeing even today. We're seeing that they're not retaliating as they're being led to the slaughter like lambs.
And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon.
In essence, I remember years ago watching The Little Rascals, and in The Little Rascals they had a guy named Froggy, and his voice did not look and sound like what he looked like. So in essence, he talked one way, but he looked another way. That is exactly what they're talking about right here. This false prophet will look like a gentle lamb, but when he speaks, he's like a beast.
And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men, and deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live.
I hate to stop it right here, but we're going to take it up in our next segment, and we're going to talk about the image of the beast. And is that possible today?